The living room, where the family meets to discuss issues, any issue which may be bothering one of the family members. That's what we do each and every Tuesday on WAC 90.1 FM with Ricardo Mitchell and DJ Aaron 868. We have casual conversations on serious topics, from sports to culture, mental health to economics, relationships to life lessons. Join us each and every Tuesday on WAC 90.1 FM. The Living Room, casual conversations on serious topics.
It's a couple minutes after 6 p.m. and I don't know what time it is where you are, but we're glad to know you're locked on to the True Nation Station WACK 90.1 FM, where we are culture crazy. This is Ricardo Mitchell, the social stage and the local stage, and we're going to be joined in a couple minutes by DJ Aaron 868, who's always great and today just a little late. We're going to kick off the program as we always do. Must give thanks and praise to the Almighty for giving us the gift of life and allowing us to see another day. No matter what time of day it is, you must always give thanks. Secondly, we want to thank those who came before us, not just the ancestors, those who paved the way, and our brother in music, Tony P. And the P this week stands for Pressing Matters. In the living room, we're going to discuss for the next couple of weeks the violence that has been running rampant and taking over the headlines in Trinidad and Tobago. We're going to address this from a number of different issues. We're going to have a couple different subject matter experts coming in as well. Tonight, we're going to start with looking at the role of the media, and maybe we could find a way to address this issue going forward. 3 decades ago, Suzanne Sheppard walked away from an abusive marriage. What followed was a long and difficult process of rebuilding her life, learning some hard lessons along the way. Suzanne, a senior editor at Guardian Media Limited, is a multimedia journalist with experience in print and television. She is currently responsible for planning and coordinating assignments for a team of journalists that operate across Guardian Media's print, electronic, and social media platforms. Suzanne spends much of her spare time sharing her story and counseling people who are trying to get out of abusive relationships. Starting with her own first-person account published in a daily newspaper, she has been telling the story about her liberation from domestic violence and has given numerous radio and television interviews over the years. Her goal is to channel her media expertise into developing multimedia platforms to share information and provide support for victims of domestic violence. Suzanne has since remarried and is a mother of 4. So join us as we welcome Suzanne Sheppard, senior editor, multimedia professional, into the living room to discuss addressing the violence, the role of the media.
Welcome to the living room. Welcome to the living room. Welcome to the living room. Welcome to the living room.
As introduced, we have the one and only, the number of hats that I've seen is someone wear in the short space of time that I've gotten to know her. I don't even know which one of the introductions to use. But I would like to say, hopefully going forward, my personal friend now in the living room,
Yes.
Miss Suzanne Sheppard. Welcome to the living room.
Thank you.
So, Aaron and I, we've been looking for a way to tackle the conversation about the rise in violence. Well, not the rising, but with the current spate of violence that Trinidad and Tobago is under right now. And unfortunately, when we began the conversation, it was going to be on gender-based violence, and then gender-based and domestic violence. And then it turned out being a conversation on gender-based, domestic violence, and violence in schools. So we realized that we had to take we are more.
Add to that too. And recently, we also have to add to that the instances of police violence.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. There were just this week a couple episodes well caught on social media. Look, this man is laughing enough.
As the old people say, if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Exactly.
Yes.
So let me laugh.
Yeah, we're in a position now where we don't just want to cry. We want to start addressing. We want to approach this particular conversation with the role that the media has in terms of the way that we perceive these ongoings, these incidents, these fatalities. Because I don't want to start throwing around terms, but sensationalization, the other one, desensitization.
Yes.
Right? The premise that there's journalistic standards appear to be, I mean, you're seeing people posting on papers things that come straight off social media, right? In the race to be first, we're not seeing any type of fact checking, but then, you know, the the corrections in a small article after the headline was big. You know, there are so many
small?
things. Small too.
Smaller than that.
Well, you know, Aaron, you have a particular pet peeve, which is the way that news circulated on social media. And there's a definite insensitivity there. So what we're looking at now is how within media we have an impact on the minds of the nation, the minds of the population as it regards to violence in the country right now.
And you know, Ricardo, it's not just about being conscious, the fact that we do have an impact, and yes, we do. And when we look at media, people like to narrowly focus on traditional media. So they look at newscasts, they look at newspapers. But we are now looking at media that is considerably expanded in the time, and I have to tell you, I have 4 decades of media experience, right? So I've been around a long time. Yes, I entered a newsroom in 1981 as a junior general reporter at the Express. But it's an expanded media and it's a very competitive environment. Unfortunately, what social media has allowed now is that there are people who may not necessarily be journalists in the traditional sense of the word to now be sharing information, to now be posting information. And that is a whole other conversation, because now we're not only talking about accuracy, but we're also talking about whether it is in fact. It is fact. We now questioning the facts of a lot of postings. But the media still has a critical role to play. We are often the first source of information. And for those of us who function in traditional media and now have had to transition to also be involved in social media, and we all are social media influencers in that regard, in that many journalists now have a presence. You know, they have their Twitter and their Facebook and their Instagram pages, and they use those platforms to engage with their viewers and readers. Very important that we use those platforms responsibly, right? Media is not only about putting out the information, right? But we can also help to start the constructive conversations about where we are and what we need to be. And what you're doing here, these guys, is an example of it. So very often, and my job, my official position in Guardian is news gathering editor. And in that position, I actually set the agenda. I actually plan the coverage for the day based on what's happening, of course. And so, yes, let's say there's a murder. We send out the people to cover the murder. But it's not just about covering the murder and getting all of and we try also to make sure that we are sensitive in our coverage of it, not being sensational, not being exploitative as well, because you can be those things if you're not properly trained. But making sure that, okay, we have had this loss. How can we now build on this discussion? Why did this happen to this community? And where do we go from here in terms of turning around the situation? And we can use these incidents as a platform for conversations. If it's a gang-related killing, let's have a conversation around gang violence. Let's bring in the subject matter experts. We're talking about gun violence. We can also bring in subject matter experts, not only on gang busting, but even on guns, use of guns, the importation of guns, the illegal firearms trade. So as media, yes, we can have constructive conversations, positive conversations, and put the information out there to continually persuade our listeners and viewers that yes, we have a problem, but we can be part of the solution. So that is just probably going all over the place, but that is something that media can do.
I love the part especially that last sentence or phrase, as a matter of fact, where you said that we can be part of the solution.
Yes.
It's something that I echo to the persons in my sphere of influence. That yes, we understand the ills in society, but we are still members of the same society. So we are part of the problem, but we are also part of the solution. It's just how you view you analyze, critically analyze the problem, and you move forward from there.
Yes, and that's very important because we are also living in this situation. And I remind people of that all the time. Some people like to say, well, the media like to do this, and the media like to, be negative, and the media like to listen. I want this problem to fix too. You have to live here. Where I live up here in Mova is one of the hot spots, right? Yeah, I live in Mova. I live in Las Alturas in Mova. I have to tell you that I was born in Laventille. So I am from this community, right? And I understand that people have this idea of these communities. But I live here and I want this community to thrive. And I don't think the solution is me packing up and going and living somewhere else and then looking across and saying, well, because I'm an editor and I live in this thing, what is wrong with this people? I am from here and I'm going to own it and I'm going to admit it. But I want to remind people that I'm a journalist. I have to pay taxes, right? I am just as vulnerable. My family was recently the victims of a robbery. I wasn't part of it, but they were victims of it. So we live it. So there's no joy for me, and there's no pleasure, and there's no gain for me, and there's no gain for any of the journalists that I work with in really sensational. We don't benefit off it. We don't profit off it. We share the same concerns. We share the same pain as the rest of the community. But not all of us are very proficient in channeling that in terms of our profession in a positive way. So that's where we have to, really put our heads together and think about what we can do. Because let me tell you, journalism, fourth estate, we have eyes, we have ears on us, and therefore we have an opportunity every day in what we do to send a message or to encourage people in a particular way.
Now, there's something that I want to highlight here. That people forget that journalists, media personalities, radio presenters, DJs, all of us are still human beings. And there are times when our emotions may get the better of us when we are delivering an article, reading a script, Ricardo.
Yeah.
Or if we even reposting something via social media.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So people have to understand that, yes, we hold a position in society where we are supposed to be held accountable for the things we say or do. But also remember that we are humans too, where we will have that moment where our emotion may get the better of us because it's in our community.
Of course.
Or it's a field that we are passionate about. Like if I decide to talk about how West Indies is West Indies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or Trinidad football is Trinidad football.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, Ricardo, just calling things.
Yeah.
Because it's sometimes pain for all of us who follow it.
Except Ricardo. Ricardo is averse to all sports.
I am not averse to all sports, right? I am trying to manage my mental health and the anxiety and sometimes depression that I get from following sports. Listen, if I sit down for 6 hours and watch while I play cricket, I expect all to play cricket for the 6 hours. I'm sorry. But anyway, that's another topic for another time. The thing is, we do have there are sensitive issues. There are things that move us emotionally in some areas. Somebody might be able to read an article or watch a video with road rage. And because it's something that moves them, they excited about it. And I don't mean excited as in joyous about it, but they become animated and passionate and they start typing and clicking on the keyboard hard and typing so fast that the phone screen starts smoking, and they might look at an incident of another form of violence and is water off a duck's back to them. The thing is, we each moved by different things, so it's almost as if we forget that even the journalists, the reporters, the media personnel, the cameramen, they have different sensitivities.
And you've got to remember, we're all human beings. I could share an experience I had, and I know now that it was quarter century ago. I admit it was quarter century ago. And I had just come out. I am I don't want to call myself a survivor, but I once lived in an abusive relationship. I was in an abusive marriage. And about 5 years after I came out of that abuse, I was actually at City Hall in Port of Spain, covering a town hall type meeting convened by the then Minister of Legal Affairs, because there had been a spate of domestic violence killings. And I remember I was there, and let me tell you, 25 years ago, people didn't talk about domestic violence as open as they do. There wasn't 25 years ago a face that came up and said, I was a battered wife, or I was beaten or so, right? There was still the attitude, one, that it was a source of shame and that the victims had a right to be shamed and to hide themselves. And then, we in Trinidad, we have this idea, it's husband and wife business. So I am there with my nice little handy notebook, sitting down there and like a good little print reporter, taking notes. And I remember a subject matter expert, as we like to call them now. I was listening to all kinds of things, and people were all around this subject, but not getting into the nitty-gritty. And I was getting increasingly frustrated. And I reached the point of, this can't happen. When a subject matter expert, he was supposed to be the big psychologist and expert, came up and said, dealing with it was like shoveling snow. We in the middle of hot Trinidad and Tobago in the middle of the year. And this man, the best analogy this man could come up with is about shoveling snow, which only people who had ever been to the United States or some temperate climate in winter could relate to, which probably wasn't the majority of people in that audience. That is when, as we were saying generally, I get vexed. And then I went out to reporter mode, and I remember clearly, I put aside my notebook in City Hall, Port of Spain. And you know how they have the town hall and they saw the little microphone and thing for the audience to talk to? I went up with the microphone and I said my name, and I said, I was a victim of domestic violence. If you know how City Hall went quiet. And I shared my story. And I became the story for the I was working at the Express that time. I became the competition. I'm now the Guardian. Ironically, the Guardian reporter went and wrote the story about me sharing it. And I remember at the time, my then editor, Lennox Grant, I went to him subsequently and I said, I felt ready at that point. I was 5 years out of the abusive relationship. And I went to Lenny, because, we are good friends to this day. And I said, Lenny, I want to write my story. And I did it in a Sunday Express. It was a spread in the Sunday Express, where I gave a first-person account of domestic violence. And so began what I didn't realize it at the time, but I actually started being involved in activism from there. Let me tell you, that was a Sunday. When you work on a Sunday paper, you have your Monday off and you come to work because you work a Tuesday to Saturday shift. Yeah. And I remember the first day I woke it out. Now, this was 25 years ago. We did not have cell phones and all of that then, right? So for people to contact me, they had to go through the PBX and Express. And all I can tell you is that from the minute I reached in our office, I spent the whole day with my phone ringing off the hook. And you know what was the striking part about it? All right, well, people come and they say, you're so brave and they admire. But you know what touched me was the many women who were still in what I'd come out of, who were reaching out to me. Some one or two couldn't talk. I remember one woman, when she heard my voice, she just started to cry on the phone. And that has resonated with me to this day. So I always use the opportunity to tell my story. So I was still a journalist. I could still use my platform as a journalist and share a story and said, this is what I went through, right? And whatever clarity whatever understanding it gave in terms of the victim perspective, I am always happy, and I hope that I have been able to make that difference, because they used to portray, or people still tend to portray, victims of domestic violence as being stupid and all kinds of things. And they don't understand that this cuts across class. It doesn't matter how well educated, how rich, how famous you are. This could happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
As is the case with most types of violence.
Sometimes it's just standing up for somebody or listening to them puts you in that position to humanize what you would otherwise look at as just being a story, or just being an incident or article or a report.
And it could also help you in terms of, even if you are not in the middle of the story, it also can give you a clearer understanding if you have to be in the position to write the story or to cover it in some way. Even being objective, to have a deeper understanding and not come to rash judgments about people who you see on any side of an issue of violence, because there are so many layers to it, and it is such a complex issue that, we should really, one of the things we need to avoid, and journalists need to be careful of that, is one, applying the stereotypes, coming to conclusions, and holding to the narratives that have often led us deeper into the problem. And lots of narratives have been circulating out there that have led us deeper into this problem of violence. So now we have it on all levels. We used to be worried about the gangs and the drive-by shooting in communities such as mine, and worried about the domestic violence because every now and then a woman would get killed in public and there would be this public outcry. Now we have violence in the school, we have violence outside the schools, we have violence even in the children's homes. And of course, now you could come out of a public gathering at some hour in the morning, do your stupidness, and you know that the police could.
Mm-hmm. before the doubles finish, fry.
Yeah.
Before bright and early, sunrise will meet you with a story on your phone.
Brother man, doubles when this be out from 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I would expect that you know that, Ricardo.
Why?
So, if you're from South, you're supposed to know that better than me.
Thank you.
Well, maybe not before it fry, but before it's served. And that's the thing. We overwhelmed to a point with information now. So how hard is it to stay sensitive to information that coming at you in print, on your phone, over the radio, television? Is almost always news now. News is 24/7, and it's not always journalism and reporting. Sometimes it's just news.
And it's not only the news you need to look at, it's also all of the other things that invade our senses throughout the day, mainly through popular media, that we have to be mindful of. I want to point out to you, for example, that there was recently, our intelligence agency recently put out one of its annual reports, and they're pointing out, for example, and these are the things that we as media practitioners can pay attention to. Now, the public will not read the whole report, maybe a little bit too much for them to take, but there are some very pertinent issues that you need to bring to their attention. This report is talking about all of our Trinidad culture and music and lifestyle, and how it's closely aligned to the criminal gang culture. And therefore, we need to look at that. And having received that information as journalists, we can now build stories looking at that. So during the time of lockdown, when we were having all of these ZESA things, right? There were certain people who were involved in this who are part of the problem. It was not your normal run-of-the-mill promoters. We as journalists note that, we can report it, we can start conversations around things like that, right? being mindful. So we raise public awareness. We have a role to play in terms of raising public awareness. I'm just giving this as an example of things we can look at. And there are even some things that we have to pay attention to that are not necessarily happening in Trinidad and Tobago. But we are always quick to take up on some trends, and we just take up on the wrong trends very often. So when some things are happening in other parts of the Caribbean, when some things are happening, even, we like all the North American styles and lifestyles and trends. These are things we can very often as journalists, and even in terms of crime, we can look at some of these things. And a term we tend to use in planning some of our coverage in these things, we can localize it. So on a very different sphere, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started to develop in the early stages, we're looking at all of the Trini connections, looking for possible Trini connections to localize it and bring relevance to it. And we did find it, and we did have some conversations around it. But these are things that as media, we can look at media and we can say sensational headlines. But if you really properly study the content of broadcasts, of public affairs programs, and of newspapers, there's a lot more, it's a lot more nuanced than that. And there's a lot more, there are some very important details taking place there. Unfortunately, because we have become a society, not just society, we become a world where everybody wants things served up in Twitter-sized bites.
Yep.
People don't go that deep. So the other challenge for us as media now is to present it in ways that will catch the attention, and that people will not just skim past it, but it will hit a chord with them and provoke the thinking and the conversations and the planning and the responses that will put us in a better place.
Now, there's something that I will admit, and I don't think a lot of persons have come to terms with it. Newspapers and media houses are businesses as well. They are in the industry to sell papers, to make people watch their news, to make people read their headlines and click on their articles. So sometimes the headline is what will draw someone to an article. However, in my humble opinion, the headline should not mislead you from the context and content of that article, which is something that is it's swaying that way with some media houses that will remain unnamed.
Well, we often don't get it right. Remember, as human beings who make errors, and I'm not making excuses for anybody, I'm just explaining what can happen and what we have to work very hard to avoid at all times. And yes, indeed, the headline is supposed to get you interested in reading the whole story, but it must be an accurate reflection of that story. It also must not be sensational. It also must not be exploitative. And one of the things, and we often hold, and there's another thing, because journalism is one of those professions where you have to train and refresh yourself very often. Things don't stay the same from one day to another. So often we have to bring in people to train our team on certain areas. So for example, a few years ago, and I think it's something we need to do again, considering what is going on in terms of child abuse in children's homes, is that we have to now refresh our training in terms of how you report on issues involving children. Because you have to respect the privacy of minors. You have to protect minors. It is for a very good reason, for example, and I can tell you that because I was a crime and court reporter. Under a certain age group, a perpetrator of a crime that is under the age of 16, we do not identify them. We do not identify them under the age of 18 because they are minors, right? Yeah, we do not, we have to get the permission of a parent before we, even in a nice thing like, SCA results coming out just now, and you'd want to go and celebrate the achievements of the kids, we can't just go and point a microphone in a child's face and say how you feel about it. Yeah. It has to be done with the knowledge and the permission of the parent or guardian. But beyond that, It's about respecting children and understanding their particular vulnerabilities. So as tempting as it can be sometimes for some people to have these big stories around kids, you have to be very, very careful. And therefore, a level of training, and probably we will also have to reach out to the Children's Authority and ask them to give us some guidelines. Remember also that Trinidad and Tobago are signatory to the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child. We have to be in conformity with that. And those conventions and all of those policies and all of those laws govern us. And that's another thing people don't understand. As media practitioners, we have to obey the law, and there are specific laws pertaining to what we do. Right? And there are specific laws that we cannot breach. And it's not just about the defamation laws, which we all, once you get into any kind of profession, anywhere near journalism, you have to deal with defamation, because even a DJ could put the company in trouble. Yeah, you can, because and that's why I shudder sometimes. Not you, but I'm just telling you. People think, well, some people are less susceptible because, unfortunately, that thing called a microphone. Some people, when they get in front of it,
just give them more liberty.
They give them out a little bit too much liberty, and sometimes it's going to the field. But what it means is we have to be constantly training, and because the environment in which we work is changing, we have to make sure that we train ourselves, we learn all of the new things, and we are properly program ourselves and our staff to approach things in a way that's professional and, relevant.
Now, there's something that that you just mentioned there, and I want to get some clarity for it. You said for children under the age of 18, you need consent from a parent or guardian in order to post a name, right? In terms of posting the names of persons who would have committed a crime, at what point is that allowed in the media? Is it allowed as soon as it happens and you have suspicion that the person is guilty? Or is it that you could post the names of the person when they are charged with the crime?
When a person is a suspect, we have to be very careful because we operate under the Westminster system. And that means, so therefore people get tied up, right? Because we, of course, all of our crime shows and things are mostly American. And we see certain liberties that are allowed in the US system that we are not allowed. So yes, we have to be very careful in terms of identifying suspects before charges are laid, right? For one thing, and people don't understand that if you watch how, for example, a story from the scene of a crime until the laying of charges evolves, facts change. People discover certain things that they didn't know at the beginning. There are clarification of certain things. And you could very, very easily, if you are not careful, really injure somebody's reputation unnecessarily. In the wisdom of the drafters of the laws, they have put it so that there's a particular way in which we approach identifying some suspects, right? And saying, so we can't come out and say Suzanne Sheppard killed so, or cuss out so and so, just on the top of it. At the point where a charge is laid and a person appears in court, we can identify, but even in reporting on the crime, because in some cases now we are going to have something, in most cases it's going to be tried. Sometimes it's a summary offense, so the person goes before the magistrate and pleads guilty or not guilty. When it's being reported out in the magistrate's court, we can report on the basis of the evidence that is coming out in that summary trial before the magistrate. In capital offenses like murder, where the charges are laid indictably, there will be a preliminary inquiry. We have to be careful in how we report on the details of the crime. We can go into the inquiry, things will be said in the inquiry. We can't even report that. We can only say that then a preliminary inquiry is going on. Only when that case Once it is determined that there's a charge to be heard before the High Court and it goes up to the High Court, when the evidence has been given in the High Court, then we can report the details of the crime. So yeah, there are lots of legal parameters that we have to make sure we're operating within, right? So we, at risk of defaming, we also can, there's a sub judice law that we can violate, and for which, of course, we pay heavy price as journalists. So, it's nice to sit down and say, well, the media does do this and the media do that. But, we have to have a certain level of training and experience and awareness, because we operate in a particular landscape that isn't as easy as a lot of some of the people. I shudder because some people are going on social media and they are saying they are reporting things and they are sharing information that is often not correct. Every month, somebody has killed sparrow. Every month.
Last week.
Yes.
Last week, Saturday, somebody called me while I was on air around 3 o'clock and I was like, hey, I hear sparrow dead. Why they didn't report it yet? And I'm there like...
Because what we then have to do, and have often done, unfortunately, the last time somebody in my organization, there was a rumor some months ago, and a member of my organization called his son, and the son's response was, again? But
over Christmas,
so what we have
terrible.
to do, and that's the thing people don't understand, right? Just hear these hot things. Why the media report that? We have to verify. We have to verify. We have to confirm that it's happening. And how do we do that? As far as it is within our ability to do so, we just have to go and see. We have to go to the scene of the incident. We have to talk to the people involved. I can't tell you the hard time we just have anytime we have severe weather in this country. And then we are covering. That's why we send out our teams. People have to be going with us, go to all of our, we have some vehicles, some of the company vehicles would be like the higher vehicles, and still we just have to go and beg some man with a backhoe or truck to put the cameras and thing up there to go through the flood waters. And while we are doing that and getting all that information in, people are sharing things, and sometimes it turns out to be a flood from Jamaica in 2009. You would not believe how often it happens. I remember during the Greenvale things, people were calling us, and we were in the office here. We had to come out to the comfort and safety of our homes to go into the newsroom to coordinate the teams who are going out as much as they could. And people are calling us and saying, people drowned, and people this, and all they reporting nothing, and all they do nothing. We cannot. And that is the challenge we face in reporting on crime and violence as well, right? You wouldn't believe how many times all kinds of fake news. There have been things they have shared that happen they say it's in Trinidad, by the price mart in Trinidad, it turned out to be Jamaica. It turned out to be some Africa 10 years ago. All kinds of, we have to curate the information we get. It is not as simple as you call. You could pick up the phone and you could tell me X, Y, and Z. My job as a journalist after that is to go on the basis of what you say and find out if that is true. Talk to the people involved and further develop the story. Now, there are some people who are not doing that, and it is something that is doing significant harm to us and to our credibility when those things happen. Okay, so
Trust is eroded.
Yes, and there's your reputation is shut down, in a serious way. The damage control and the repair that needs to be undertaken, sometimes you lose that, and it's hard to regain it. So you have to be very careful.
I'm happy that you brought up the issue of curating the information. And another thing I will add to it is the context of which the social media news houses, I'll just call them that, as respectable as possible. The social media news houses, they just post videos. They don't post a caption explaining what the video is about. And if they do post a caption, for starters, sometimes it's in all caps. Other times the grammar is not the best. It's inaccurate information. I once saw one where the person said that the incident took place in Golconda by just off the highway, which is close to where I live. But when I watched the picture, that is not anywhere close to Golconda.
Yeah.
And people are reporting these things, and these articles are having thousands of shares. The videos are having hundreds of thousands of views. But when a credible news house posts an article, it probably have 200 shares. Because
But not
people are not in support of mainstream media again, because they say the mainstream media lying. Because they push the agenda.
Yeah, no, they think we have agendas and that, listen, I can tell you, even on the political thing, both political parties are sure we are avid supporters of the other.
Of the other one.
When we just have to be objective. But even worse than that, is that the other challenge we have, and we operate on all the social media platforms, and I can tell you throughout the day, we try to update, we try to post breaking news. If we do not watermark our images, we find our images being used without our permission and in ways that we would not we are not happy about. Not just the fact of the sharing, because the fact of the matter is our purpose is to inform people, right? But when it's done in a way that actually is not beneficial to the public, there are several filters through which every piece of information is not about filtering out truth. It is filtering out distortions and misrepresentations I'm talking about. So apart from the fact that a lot of this information does not necessarily meet all the criteria of who, why, what, when, where, how, which every news story is supposed to have, there is the additional issue of it being presented in a way that really distorts the facts, right? So it could be, yes, you really did get the information and it really is a vehicular accident, or it really is, say, a crowd rioting at some public space and all of that. But the way it is presented skews the facts in a way that is not beneficial or does not facilitate the truth, of the full story getting out. And these are a lot of the challenges that we face in covering. And the thing about it, even in terms of the violence and things, there are people who get a kick out of all of the shock, horror, and all of the gruesomeness of things, which is another. And I don't think that is serving us well at all in this country. We don't, and I know people say we don't have the truth. We, for example, will not post dead bodies on our front pages in the way that you would see them sometimes promoted on social media. We will not show somebody shot and bleeding out on the ground. And it is not just a matter of being wimps, for want of a better word. It's about sensitivity. That is somebody's loved one. And you have to be conscious of the fact that you can tell the story without hurting people unnecessarily, without even sometimes the more gruesome things, putting things there that are going to give small children nightmares, because we are national media house. Our information doesn't go out to specific targeted audiences. We don't have a rating system where this will only be seen by people 18 years and over.
Right.
We are a national newspaper. So even in reporting on the violence, we have to do it in a way that will tell the story without causing harm, without causing people unnecessary pain. There is enough pain in reporting a crime, and therefore you have to be responsible in presenting it. You can report the matter, and the idea is to get the information out there, but also my high expectation in all that we do is that when we put these stories out there and we do follow up on these stories, our discussion will be, and the kind of awareness raising we want to do is around how can we make this better? How can we make sure that this does not happen again? How can we turn Move-Alavantil around so that these gateway communities that lead into the capital city become model communities? How can we make sure that we can build and learn from these things? It sounds, like, being on too optimistic, but you always have to reach for the stars.
I'm looking at the distrust that has developed for mainstream media also comes from our appetite to be entertained. I don't want to, I'm not going to water this one down. I'm not going to dance around it. The fact remains is mainstream media comes across as boring or late, or they're not actually saying anything in the article because you're all presenting facts. People entertained by stories. So when you just give them a video with no context, it actually allows us to create our own stories. It gives us this excitement of trying to get the S from somebody as to what actually happened. So instead of seeing, hey, they kill so-and-so and the whole somebody else, a legitimate news report would come out and say that someone is assisting investigation, right? Or there's a search for a person of interest. But that is not the story. That is information, and people like stories. So what we're seeing is that people not trusting media or think that media has an agenda because they feel like they're not getting the story. And I think that is damaging, because now we no longer look at getting information so that we can address an issue, but it's about how much of a story we could get so that we know a little more than somebody else, or we find out before somebody else, or we had the inside scoop that even the big shot papers them don't have. So I think our appetites also feed in a desire for sensationalism. I don't think it's just something that irresponsible journalists and reporters putting out there. I think that there's an appetite for it.
And you're right, that is a factor problem that we face every day in that. And the thing about it too, because of that, there's a lot of information that is being shared that is not true. And even months after you say it is not true, there are still pockets of people perpetrating this misinformation, running with this misinformation, sometimes, to the detriment of some people and some situations. And that's the difficulty in all of it. There's always a complication. So, the lines are being blurred sometimes between what people want, their expectations in terms of popular entertainment and news. And I suppose the 24/7 news cycles has, of course, heightened the drama of a lot of the news happening, because we can now capture a lot of these things in real time, right? But at the same time, this is not a Hollywood script. This is real life. So whereas the Hollywood script, and people don't understand that, they will take something that in real life will take a whole week to happen and compress it into 30 seconds. But some people think that is their expectation.
Yeah.
And it's not so.
Aaron, if you want to jump in, you might have to unmute your mic.
My bad. As we said earlier in tonight's show, that we have gone to an era now where we have to condense everything to 140 characters. Or into a 15-second video clip, because that we like to have an Instagram story. Or a 1-minute post to get the entire point across. We are in that era now. But what we have to understand is that for real reporting with accurate information, it's going to take a lot more than just a 1-minute clip or 140 characters. And for persons who don't know, characters include faces.
Of course.
No, I just had to clear that up, because some people would think that it's 140 letters. No, that includes spaces.
Yeah, we live in
punctuations.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, we live in an era of clickbait and above the fold. Once you leaving just enough information before they see more to get the click. So, of course, they're going to use attention-grabbing words. Of course, the headline going to be misleading, right?
Hey,
It-
You know the thing about it, it has always been,
Mhm.
and more so because I mean, as I said, I'm multimedia, so I know what, and I've done television and radio. I do television and radio in addition to print. But particularly in print, you have to present, there are style rules.
Mhm.
And this is not something that we only have here in Trinidad. That's global,
Yep.
industry-wide, right? And that above default thing applied long before there was social media. You know.
That's where it
Yeah,
comes
That
from.
above default
Yeah.
thing, remember, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, Guardian used to be a big broadsheet paper,
Mm-hmm.
right? People used to have to read it in quarters.
Yep.
So that above default thing really dates back long time, long
Mhm.
before I
Yep.
was a journalist.
Correct is
And
right.
there has always been, because I could tell you from television, we go out there and we shoot a whole lot of video, we do interviews, we just have to tone down the soundbite. Nobody gets to go, there are fights. Some reporters, when they come back all excited because they get all this experience, they go there and they bargain with the producer, which is the equivalent of an editor in print, to get a little more time for the package, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because they have all of these sound bites and they have all of this great video. But generally, you have to compress it into a minute and a half, right?
Yep.
That is
Yep.
it, right? And but therefore, the idea is not about cutting out the story, you know, but you develop a certain expertise. Because the fact of the matter is, and this is something I learned early on in journalism, your story could get cut down to one paragraph on a bad day. You better make sure that the important part of your story is that first paragraph, right? So you learn to write. You learn to write in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
You learn to prepare scripts in a particular way. That's just how it is.
you need to condense it
Mm-hmm.
because you could go, and I'm going on to, and share a little secret here. You could go and record 24 hours worth of footage,
Mhm.
but all that getting published is 1 minute.
Exactly.
So
And trust me,
that-
it's hurt, huh? But you
that's-
spend a
that-
whole day.
That's if you want views anyway, because you could also sit down every week and talk for an hour about topics that matter to people and they don't bother to watch the whole hour. So then when the time comes, they're asking you, the individual, to get them the breakdown, get them the headlines, get them the highlights. Everybody want the cliff notes now.
And I feel we had to
Yeah,
do a
but-
show called that in Cliff Notes.
But you know the thing about it though, there are options though, because what we often do, and that is what social media has allowed us to do.
Mhm.
So for example, we will go and we'll cover thing and we'll get all these great images. And generally the maximum, except of course if it's a picture page in the B section of the paper, you know. But mostly the big news stories is just one or two pictures accompanying them,
Yeah.
except when it's so huge that we actually say we're going to do a wrap and we have images around the front, the cover and the back page of the paper.
Mhm.
That is only now and then.
Yeah.
But however, the option we get in social media now is that we can have two versions of our story. So we could have the one that appears in the regular newscast, and then we can tell people, if you want to see more on this story, go to our Facebook page or to our Instagram page and see the full videos, all the pictures on that. And that's what we have been doing now. So for those who want to see more than Cliff Notes, those who will actually take the time to read a long form story, there are options now, thanks to social media. Because before it was either, if it didn't make the newscast, well, sorry for you. If it didn't make the next day papers, trouble for you, you know, that's it.
Just the other night, I know somebody sit down looking at the entire news broadcast for an interview feature that never aired. So
Who was that, you?
me? No good, sir. No good, sir. I get on. As terrible as it sounds, I don't know if I have the capacity to sit down and watch news anymore. You know.
I agree with you. I think the last time I watched news was in 2006, around November the 11th, when Trinidad and Tobago qualified for the World Cup.
Oh dear.
Wow. Yeah, when I end up.
Must encourage you all to watch the news. You should look at news, particularly because you're involved in this I would encourage you to. It is not always easy to digest, but it is necessary. I actually have developed and I continue to have knowledge of things that some people have my age don't sign off on, because I think it's important to know. So it's very hard for, the average 60-year-old woman, the little teenage grandchildren and thing could tie up in string, in circle and thing. It's a little harder with me because of my profession and having to be in touch with certain information.
Yeah.
But the other thing about it is not just about taking in that information, but I think in terms of profession, it also is a good way of looking at styles of presentation. It's good to look across, I'm an avid consumer of all kinds of news, and I find it helps me. So that I've come to the point now where I see a certain style from the BBC. I see another style from CNN. I see another treatment of the story from Al Jazeera. But it's not only that. Then you also look at how all of the technical input that goes into the presentation, which is constantly evolving, and things that we need to be aspiring to. Because we have to think of ourselves. I am not just an editor of a newspaper for Trinidad and Tobago. In this new dispensation, I'm reporting to the world from this corner of the world.
All
right? So, you have to be with it.
We are getting perilously close to the end of our program this evening. So we're going to allow our guest to deliver some closing remarks and also to say goodnight to anyone that she wants to say goodnight to.
I just want to say that I'm glad to, talk about my profession. I will always say that I know that in terms of rank respectability, that journalists are probably at the bottom of the table because of what we do, and some of these ways we often have to get our hands dirty dealing with some things that the average person doesn't want to deal with. But I can tell you that we still play an important role, and people have often signed our death warrant unnecessarily. The fact is, people thought radio would be dead by now. People thought television would be dead by now. And certainly they have been doing last rights on newspapers for quite a while now. But we have seen that we go through times of dormancy and resurgence. What I do say is that our basic role has not changed. In the way we do it and the channels through which we do it have expanded, but the basics of journalism have not changed, and the important function we play is still the same important function, regardless of what people think. There's a point after consuming all of the more popular channels that people do come back to legacy media for confirmation and for proper context on these issues. And that is something that we have to hold on to, and that is something that we have to continue to provide. A proper context, the facts, and yes, if we have to choose between being factual or first, factual always wins out. Because if you're first with lies, you're just not first. So I thank you for the opportunity to come and share. And I just want to give a shout out to all of my South people. By marriage, I'm a Southerner by marriage because my husband is from Marabella originally. And I have to hear all these stories about Marabella and South Trinidad. And he's a regular WAC person too, so shout out to all of the South community and the WAC family. And it's been a pleasure to be able to come on and share my little 2 bits on journalism with you guys. Thanks a lot.
Well, this is yours truly, Ricardo Mitchell, the social stage and the local stage. Thanking you for joining us in the living room tonight. Thank you, Suzanne, for joining us this evening. I thank you for sharing with us. I thank you for helping us understand the role that the media has to present information while maintaining dignity. I think that is something that if we put that into context, we could see that what mainstream media still tries to do is present the information, good news, bad news or otherwise, and maintain the dignity of all involved. So, on behalf of the living room, thank you so much for joining us. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. And remember, guys, we don't know how much time remains. The hourglass is opaque. Aaron, all yours. Do you think so?
So no matter what you do, be good and stay safe. If I get that part.
Yeah.
This is yours truly, DJ here on 868. I'm always great, and trust me, I am never late. I end every week by reminding you that love is the currency. So spend some today. Let somebody know that you love them. And I echo and say thank you very much, Suzanne, for spending this time with us inside the living room. It's an honor to have someone with your wealth of experience here with us, and to know that you are Southie by association. We'll just call you an honorary Southie from now. Up next is Mr. Desmond with the big band. And you can catch me on Saturday inside Sweet Circle Saturdays. And this week from 4 p.m. on Saturday is the Skinner Park segment. 2 hours of Kaiso on a Saturday afternoon.
Kaiso, you say?
Kaiso. Raw, unadulterated Kaiso. With no seasoning. Right? So keep it locked, guys.